Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. I'm kidding. I'm not going to sing the theme this time. Welcome back to my four-part extemporaneous look at the Disney afternoon. Last time we talked about the landscape of television, what it was like at the time, and why it was more possible for shows like the ones that I'm talking about to be produced. So, syndicated cable television was untamed land. Disney television animation was going to make a claim to this untamed land, specifically children's afternoon programming. But before they jumped into the pool, both feet first, they wanted to test the water. So before they 100% committed to producing this massive afternoon block of children's programming, they created 3 shows just to make sure that they could successfully create popular, highly rated animated shows for syndicated cable television. And those 3 shows were The Woozles, which nobody remembers, The Adventures of the Gummy Bears, which we talked about last time, and the subject of today's video, Ducktales. Out of those 3 shows, Ducktales was always going to be the crown jewel. It was always going to be the big show that they were going to put all their money and resources into because they knew that it was going to be a hit. Now the question is, how the heck did they know that DuckTales was going to be a hit before they even started working on it? Well, for starters, it was, out of those 3 shows, it was the only one that was based on an existing Disney property, namely the Uncle Scrooge comics by Carl Barks. Now, this is one of the greatest comedy/action-adventure comics ever created. Carl Barks was a genius. He is an underrated genius. If you can find issues of this comic, if you can find a collection, be it trade paperback or hardback, get it. I cannot recommend these comics enough. They are among the most influential comics to ever be published. And if you doubt that, well, let me tell you that the opening sequence, the opening temple sequence of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, is based almost frame for frame on an Uncle Scrooge comic. I can't make this up. Again, it was one of those underrated gems that people like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, who are lovers of pop culture, were very much into and very much respected. And then, so right now, it's the 1980s, and what just so happens to be the biggest movie franchise of the era? Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, which borrowed from the Uncle Scrooge comics. It's huge. It's in the zeitgeist. It's in the social consciousness of the 80s. So here's Disney. They have this property that influenced the biggest franchise of the era, the biggest film franchise of the era. So why not go ahead and take advantage of this, ride the lightning, and put the Uncle Scrooge comics on TV, which would then become DuckTales, of course. So that's how they knew that DuckTales was going to be a hit before they even started working on it. Fun fact, this was the first animated show to have Andrea Romano as a voice director. Now, she wasn't the primary voice director for DuckTales. That was Gordon Hunt, who is considered by many to be the father of voice direction, one of the people responsible for inventing the methods by which you direct actors for animated features and other voice jobs. Gordon Hunt, who by the way is Helen Hunt's father, one of the best to ever do it. At the time, Andrea Romano was Gordon Hunt's assistant. That's how she started working in the animation world. And so she learned at the feet of the master. According to her, she came into work one day. She was talking to Gordon Hunt about all his responsibilities for the day, his schedule for the day, and right after she finished listing that off, he said, "Hey, by the way, I have an important errand that I have to run at this time. Would you mind voice directing the session for Ducktales this afternoon?" And Andrea Romano was just shocked, flabbergasted, and she said, "Okay." And Gordon Hunt just handed her like a list of like what they were missing. It was like a pickup session. Um, Basically lines and sound effects and incidental sounds that they were missing from a specific episode. Um, and he handed her the list and she said, okay. And she was super nervous and probably got way more takes than what they actually needed. But then when Gordon came back and she nervously, like, waited for him to listen to her work, he said, oh, by the way, good job on that. And that's how she started. And after that, he would have her voice direct sessions for other Disney afternoon shows. In fact, if you look up behind the scenes featurette for Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers on YouTube, you will see that the director, the only director who is interviewed for that featurette, is Andrea Romano. Her first cartoon where she was the main voice director for, was Batman the Animated Series. Not a bad place to start. But the crazy thing is that, of course, Batman the Animated Series being produced by Warner Brothers, which is Disney's main rival, their main competition. Because Gordon Hunt loved her so much and believed in her so much, he allowed her to go across the street to go over to Warner Brothers and work for them simultaneously while she was still working on Disney afternoon shows, which is nuts. And of course, now she is the most condecorated voice director of all time. She's the voice director that other directors look to as far as how to direct animation. Batman the Animated Series was the show that changed how voice acting is done. Before Batman the Animated Series, actors tend to be either overly comical and silly, or to over enunciate their lines. Oh no, Thundercats Moonrat is hiding in that bush. And hey, that was great at the time, but when you listen to Batman the Animated Series and the characters just sound normal, they just talk like normal people, it made a big difference, and it made a huge impact, because from that point on, that's pretty much how most cartoons were recorded, and all of that started on DuckTales, believe it or not. Anyway, so as I just established, DuckTales was based on Carl Barks' Uncle Scrooge comics. However, there were a few changes made from the comic to the cartoon. It's an adaptation, not a recreation. It happens with every adaptation. In the comics, one of the fun things of the comic, outside of the cool, like, treasure hunting adventure aspect of it, is that Scrooge is an overt parody of rich businessmen and capitalists. And there's a lot of brilliant humor directed at that particular group of people. In the cartoon, yes, he is still greedy and all that, and still focused on his fortune and all that, but he is more of an obsessive, cartoonish, greedy a-hole. To the point that, in my opinion, there are a lot of episodes where he's very hateful towards the kids, towards the nephews and Webby, and he puts his fortune and his greed above them, and that really bothers me as an adult. Something that I didn't notice as a kid, but bothers me a lot now. Also, in the comics, he primarily had adventures with his nephew, Donald Duck. For the cartoon, they were concerned that because of Donald's, ridiculous speech impediment, that kids wouldn't be interested, or audiences wouldn't be interested in a show where there was a character they couldn't understand. So Donald was reduced to a cameo role in the series, and he was primarily replaced with a new character called Launchpad McQuack, played by the great Terry McGovern. which of course ended up being, the runaway character, this iconic original character of the show. Of course, he would go on to be on Darkwing Duck. Many spin-offs were proposed starring Launchpad McQuack because that was their character and they could do whatever they wanted with him, and he was so popular. But his first appearance was his creation was basically as a replacement for Donald Duck. Like I said, this was the biggest show that they produced out of the original three. A lot of time, energy, and money went into it, and a lot of focus group testing. And as part of that focus group testing, they realized, hey, we could attract that big female audience that we're not getting on other shows by throwing in a female character or female characters into the show that weren't there. And their brilliant solution to this was Miss Beakley, a subservient maid, and her granddaughter, Webby, who is the most overtly badly written female character in the history of the Disney afternoon. It's just painfully obvious that she was created by a bunch of middle-aged white men who didn't know how to write female characters. And she is just everything that they thought would appeal to young girls, they put into this character. She wears pink, she plays with dollies, she likes to have tea parties, she always makes friends with cute animals. She's the most cutesy-wootsy, harmless, just most one-dimensional character on the show, and is so freaking annoying. However, on the flip side of that, you have one of the best villains in the entire Disney afternoon, Magica the Spell, which brings me to talking about the cast. Holy crap, this show has one of the most awesome casts of the era. A lot of heavy hitters in this cast. Magica the Spell, of course, being played by June Foray. Russi Taylor, Minnie Mouse, voiced all three of the nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Chuck McCann played Scrooge's butler, Duckworth. And, of course, Tony Anselmo, who has been the definitive Donald Duck for 4 decades going now, of course, reprised his character of Donald for Ducktales, and a few times he showed up. But the main guy himself, Scrooge McDuck, was played by the great Alan Young, one of the most beloved actors in the business. Alan Young used to be most famous for playing Wilbur on Mr. Ed. For those of you who don't know, that was a sitcom about a talking horse. I believe that says it all. Fun fact about Alan Young, he became independently wealthy because the contract that he signed for being on Mr. Ed, he agreed to be paid scale as long as he got a percentage of the merchandising from the show, which seemed like a bad deal at the time, but it turned out to be a really awesome deal because in the 80s, when the show came out in VHS, he made out like a bandit. And then again in the late 90s when the show came out on DVD. So what I'm trying to illustrate to you is 2 things. One, Alan Young, the actor who played Scrooge McDuck, was financially sound, like Scrooge McDuck. He wasn't swimming in money like the character, but he was okay financially. And more importantly, Alan Young was basically retired at the time. He took an early retirement from acting. He played Scrooge McDuck because he wanted to, because he loved acting and he loved playing the character. The end. Scrooge was the first TV and film role that he was ever outright offered. Here's this brand new division of Disney Television Animation. They were producing the biggest show they had produced thus far, and they were offering him a starring role. So hell yeah, he took it. And on top of that, this is around the time that the Disney character voices division was created, which is a specific division of Disney that exists to this very day that maintains the quality and consistency of who plays the voices, meaning that the majority of the time, the same actor who was the original voice actor continues playing the voice until that person can't do it anymore, or unfortunately has passed away. So Alan continued playing Scrooge McDuck through the cartoon, through the Ducktales movie, and through Disney attractions, commercials, records, Disney Ducktales on Ice, and all the way through the 90s and into the 2000s, where he voiced Scrooge McDuck in the Ducktales remastered video game. That's a long, long career of playing the same character. And again, he did it because he loved it. Anyway, so this show was a massive success, just as the producers predicted that it would be. It found its first home on the brand new Fox network at the time. Fox was a brand new cable station. They were trying to build their brand. They were trying to build their channel. They were desperate for content for the channel, and they really wanted to have a focus in children's programming. And DuckTales, it was going to be a big deal, so they were the first channel to buy DuckTales episodes. They were a big hit. They were bringing the ratings, and they were looking to build an entire children's block of programming. I can't remember if it was in the morning or in the afternoon, but they were looking to build an entire block of children's programming around DuckTales because they had it. They had a show that was a hit. And then right when they were about to do that, Disney Television Animation decides to do the Disney Afternoon because it was syndication, and they didn't have any actual, there was no contract, there was no loyalty that they had to the Fox network. They pulled DuckTales. They stopped producing episodes for Fox, and there was a higher bidder. There was somebody else who was interested, other networks that were interested in the Disney Afternoon, so they went with them. They produced the Disney Afternoon for another network, and they stopped producing DuckTales episodes for Fox, which was a huge slap in the face, but it is what prompted the head of programming for Fox to create the Fox Kids, the Saturday morning block, the legendary Saturday morning block that we all love, to hire Margaret Lynch to be the head of children's programming for Fox Kids. And the first 3 shows that she greenlit for Fox Kids were X-Men the Animated Series, Power Rangers, and Batman the Animated Series. Those 3 shows exist because of that incident, because DuckTales was pulled from the Fox network. Imagine. So if that wouldn't have happened. So, and also, it's a perfect illustration, a perfect example that something good can come out of something bad. Anyway, so DuckTales was such a massive hit. So why did it end? To be perfectly honest, the simplest answer is that it was a victim of its own success. It was so big, it was so massive, it garnered such high ratings that they kept producing episodes, and it became the longest running Disney Afternoon show. And it just overstayed its welcome. It was on way too long. They did a movie, they came back for another season, and just like any show that's been on for way too long, to try and keep it fresh, they add a bunch of new characters. They added Bubba the Cave Duck, which has a very polarizing presence to hardcore fans of the show. And of course, my personal favorite, Gizmo Duck, and why I kept tuning in to watch the show, voiced by the great Hamilton Camp. But yeah, it was on for way too long, to the point where I remember being a fan of the show as a kid and just completely losing interest in it, and like tuning in like a half hour late into the Disney afternoon and watch the other three shows on the block because I was so tired of Ducktales. It was always the same thing, and other audiences must have felt the same way because eventually the ratings started to go down, and eventually, they did what they would do with most of the Disney afternoon shows. They would remove the older show, the one that that would start the block. They would remove it, move all the other three shows up in the time slots, and at the very end of the Disney afternoon, they would add a brand new show. So Gummy Bears went first. They moved DuckTales, Rescue Rangers, and Tailspin up. They added Darkwing Duck, and then DuckTales eventually, bunk, was removed. Those three shows were moved up, and they added, I believe, Goof Troop was the next one, which was the first Disney afternoon show that I honestly didn't like. But if you like it, hey, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. So there you go. That's what happened to DuckTales. It went from being one of the biggest hits in animation from the 80s to eventually people just getting tired of it. Now, do I recommend this show? Honestly, yes and no. If you grew up with it and you're a super duper fan, and you watch it now on Disney Plus, I'm sure you will still love it. There will still be elements of it that you will still love. However, if you were a casual viewer like myself, and a lot of the elements from the show didn't faze you that much when you were a kid, now looking at it as an adult and seeing how overly greedy, how often Scrooge values his money over his friends, his family, and the children he takes care of, it really bothers me. It really it gets to me. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And just as an adult, watching the adventures of a rich a-hole get richer just doesn't sit right. These are elements that I feel like they fixed in the 2017 reboot, which I feel is they took all the elements of the original show that didn't work and either fixed them or made them better. And I cannot recommend that reboot enough. One of the greatest reboots of all time, where Scrooge already has all his wealth, he already has all his money, he already has all the money that he needs, just like Alan Young. So he has adventures because he wants to, because they're fun, because they make him feel alive, just like Alan Young with acting. He continued acting, he continued playing Scrooge because he loved it. So I feel that that connection there is beautiful. Anyway, so those are my thoughts and crazy obscure facts about DuckTales. Agree, disagree, feel free to say so in the comment section below. As per usual, my only request is for you guys to be civil with one another and treat each other right, respect each other's opinions. We are all on the same team. A few announcements before we sign off. Of course, next time that we do one of these videos, I will be talking about the first original show of the Disney afternoon, which was Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. Next week, my next scripted video will be the second part of my Cartoon versus Campaign video series, where I'm talking about The Legend of Vox Machina Season 2 and comparing that show with the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that it was inspired. That video will be out on Wednesday, May 3rd. Right now, on my Patreon page, I posted a video where I share my experience of watching the original 1987 Ninja Turtles show from start to finish, all 193 episodes. If you want to check that out, but you are not a patron, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/E-Rant and pledge $1. That's it, $1. You pledge $1, I can continue producing content as the Blockbuster Buster, and you get bonus videos. You can't beat that with a wooden stick. And last but not least, I am officially announcing that my next honest review will be on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon from 2003. Another video request that I have gotten for years. Anyway, thank you so much for your ongoing support, because the fact remains, and I say this every time because it's 100% true, I could not do what I do without you.